to be a central focus of the staff.
Staff's understanding was that the meetings would be held in the yurts and that the yurts would be used for, that the meetings would be held in the yurts, discussions, and that the yurts would be utilized for overnight activity. And that was the driving force behind the request for a permanent facility.
So I'm trying to line things up. So are the meetings different from the book club? I'm trying to get a sense of what activities are taking place or what are projected to take place in the different spaces.
The large yurt is essentially a visiting elders
just a moment,
yurt.
Jim.
People do.
Jim, just a moment. Please be clear to all the commissioners when you're asking a question, if you're asking it of staff or of a member of the public. We want to make sure that we don't reopen the public hearing inadvertently by just allowing people to come back up and speak on everything.
So I'm going to ask the appellant then what activities are taking place in the yurt so we can be specific about.
And for the record, my name is Jim Moore. I forgot to say that. I'm poorly trained in this room. I apologize. The activity in the yurt is primarily there have been meetings. They're generally one-on-one. It's not big group gatherings. That happens in the garage. The book club, things like that. Some of the other meetings happen in the garage. The yurts are used to change clothes during a sweat. There's a library in one of the small ones, or there's hope to be a library in one of the small ones, and people change clothes before and after sweats. It's also a visiting elders yurt that has somebody, almost always one person, but sometimes a person and their spouse, and in one instance in the last 4 years or 3 years or however long it's been, one person, their spouse, and a child. And that happens, from testimony you've heard, that happens about 24 nights a year or so. It's not a continual thing. There's no wild booze parties or anything like that. It's not very, I know the staff hasn't done any kind of measurement or, evaluated that, but it's not anything that you couldn't have by standing in your own backyard.
And then a question for staff. Can you tell me how temporary structures are handled in our code?
Within the building code or within the zoning code?
Zoning code.
Policy? We would look at a structure as being a permanent structure if it was used for overnight habitation. Generally, within the code, I've never seen any temporary structures used as for ongoing overnight activities or long-staying activities. In fact, habitable structures, as the commissioner pointed out, garages are not. Usually a garage is a facility for an automobile. Overnight activities aren't, for example, allowed in an accessory structure that would be located in the rear yard setback area. So
if I could try to help with our code, it doesn't really use the word structure. We talk about two things. We talk about activities, and then we talk about facilities. And so we talk about facilities being either enclosed, either residential facilities, or then we talk about non-residential facilities. And those get broken down a little bit more into enclosed or into open. So you could have an open non-residential facility, which could be, for example, a farm, or it could be a sidewalk cafe. An enclosed non-residential facility is within a structure. The planning code, though, doesn't say, well, a yurt is now different than, say, a building. So we're just talking about enclosed residential facilities or open non-residential facilities. So, and that you could have both on the same property. You could have components that are open and components that are enclosed. Just like on the activity question, you could have multiple activities on one property. You could have residential activities, and you could also have, in this case, community assembly civic activities, which is where we classify churches and other religious organizations and activities.
Through the chair to Commissioner Weinstein.
Well, no, sorry. Did you want to follow up on that? Okay. That's marinating. Commissioner Monchamp.
I was simply going to ask Mr. Markamp if he could say what section he's citing to.
I was